Welcome to Who's That Pokemon, the most in-depth Pokemon anime rewatch podcast on the entire internet. If you didn't know, this is a retrospective look back on the Pokemon anime series, episode by episode from the very beginning. This show has been airing for over 20 years now and has over 1,000 episodes, yet it seems to get neglected by Pokemon fans, so I thought it was about time I got a podcast entirely dedicated to it. The first episode I'm covering today is the 27th episode of the Indigo League series titled Hypno's Naptime. The Japanese title is Sleeper and the Pokemon Hypnotism. This episode first aired in Japan on September 30, 1997, and in the United States on October 13, 1998. On this day in Pokemon history for the Japanese air date, in 2001, Pokemon Crystal was released in Australia. And I'd have to say, Pokemon Crystal is probably the game I'm most nostalgic for from my childhood. I'm not entirely sure why, because Pokemon Silver was actually the first game I owned as a kid. But for some reason, Crystal was the one I latched onto to the most and played it to death. Maybe it was to do with the cartridge. The cartridge was pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know why I specifically latched onto that one over Silver. Maybe just purely because it was newest. Like, kids kind of operate like that. So yeah, it's probably the biggest reason why I'm still into Pokemon to this day, I'd say. And funnily enough, on this day in Pokemon history for the American air date, in 2000, Gold and Silver were released in Australia. So the Gen 2 main series games being released around the same time here as these episodes for Australia. As I said, Silver was the first game that I actually owned, and I loved it. I actually remember when I went to get it for my birthday, I can't remember what store it was now, but when we went to like the games counter or whatever, and asked for it, the person selling the game basically tried to talk me out of it. She was like, "Oh, this game's kind of complex for a kid. Like, you probably don't want this." And I think she was trying to sell me, like, I can't remember what she was trying to sell me. Maybe Donkey Kong Country or something. But I was like, no, I definitely want Pokemon. And yeah, I thought it was real weird that she was trying to talk me out of it. I mean, I was like a little kid. I was like 4 years old at the time. Maybe I might have been 4 or 5. And I guess maybe she was trying to talk me out of it because there's a lot, it's like very text heavy, and obviously I'm pretty young, so I can't like read great. But I mean, first of all, you can get through Pokemon without reading fine. And second of all, don't assume my reading level, lady. The IMDb rating for this episode was a 7.1. The screenplay was written by Yukiyoshi Ohashi. This is his 5th episode for the show, and it's his lowest rated episode to date. He last wrote the highly acclaimed Bye Bye Butterfree, so a bit different in terms of critical reception there between the episode he's writing today and his last episode. The director is our boy Osamu with the hard to pronounce last name. I probably should have looked that up in between his episodes. His 5th episode as director here, he's tying Yuji Asada for most episodes, so I definitely should look up how to pronounce his last name properly. It's also his lowest rated episode so far. He last directed Abra and the Psychic Pokemon. There are no human character debuts here. However, for the Pokemon debuts, we get Psyduck, Drowsy, and Hypno. The Who's That Pokemon for this episode is Psyduck, and I actually was surprised by this. I would have thought it would be Hypno, but yeah, instead we get Psyduck, who is going to be captured later on in this episode. But with all of that said, it's time for the episode summary and discussion. After arriving at Hop 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 Town, Ash and his friends suddenly encounter a woman calling for her son Arnold, who embraces Ash by mistake. Once Ash clears up the misunderstanding, the group learns that Arnold, as well as many other children, have been missing for 3 days. Officer Jenny pulls up to add another missing child poster, and Brock immediately volunteers to help solve the mystery. Ash is reminded of his own mother and takes it upon himself to solve the mystery.
Arnold!
Huh?
Arnold! Where have you been, Arnold? Mother's been so worried.
Excuse me, but my name is Ash.
And my name is Misty, ma'am.
She wasn't talking to you, Misty.
I guess not.
Oh, I'm so sorry. But you look just like my Arnold.
Alright, Hop Hop Town, sorry, I left out a hop. It's the worst goddamn town name in history. I'm not sure what the Japanese name is. Maybe the Japanese name is exactly the same. But this is just terrible, terrible, terrible name. What? Everything so far has had like a relatively normal name, and then out of nowhere they arrive in Hop 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 Town. It's just very, very bizarre. And if my piece of trivia from the last episode is correct about the P1 Grand Prix taking place in Celadon City, it's very weird that they leave Celadon City and then end up returning to it for that tournament. Like, it makes me kind of doubt that piece of trivia that I grabbed off Bulbapedia. But yeah, it's pretty tough to verify because the manner that it was confirmed that the P1 Grand Prix is supposed to take place in Celadon is very obscure. The first shot we get of Arnold's mother here in this episode is a close-up of her gigantic boobs, which was very, very disturbing. She also just shoves Ash's head straight into them, which again, also quite disturbing. Not as disturbing as... Well, I'm currently at the moment, I'm rewatching, or watching for the first time, I'd say. I've only seen sporadic episodes of Dragon Ball. So I'm rewatching Dragon Ball from the start. And God, I knew that the show was real perverted, but it's much more perverted than I thought. And so when I saw sort of this, it gave me Dragon Ball vibes, although, yeah, not quite the same as, like, Goku, like, slapping girls in the vagina. That's, yeah, never quite happened in Pokemon. Speaking of Arnold's mother, we have the voice here. It's Casey Rogers, who also voices Arnold himself. So she's the mother of herself. It's a very, very weird situation, but I guess Veronica Taylor does that for Ash and Delia. It's also really common, a really common sort of go-to in the anime to have someone mistake Ash as their son. I feel like it's happened at least half a dozen times. I know it definitely happens in the Orange Island season. Somebody mistakes Ash for her son again, and it's definitely happened other times as well. So, yeah, it's a trope that they fall back onto quite a lot. We should also address the main plot of the story, which is that a bunch of children have been going missing. And I think that's actually a really creepy sort of introduction to the episode, is that, oh yeah, all these kids are just disappearing off the face of the earth and no one knows what's going on. Like, that is, I mean, the setup for like a horror movie or a thriller. But no, this is an episode of Pokemon. It is also kind of unorthodox for Officer Jenny to then like sort of recruit a bunch of kids to help with a police case. Like, this is a serious police case. This isn't one of those wacky ones where it's like, oh, those darn rascal Squirtle are causing a ruckus. Please help us out. No, it's like children have gone missing for several days. I think you probably should get more police officers on the case, not a bunch of kids who are under 16. Finally, we get a flashback to an episode nobody outside of Japan had ever seen. We see a flashback to Beauty and the Beach, and we see sort of that was Ash's last encounter with his mother. And so that's what he visualizes when he sort of thinks about, I guess, how sad it is that Arnold's mother has lost her son. But millions of kids must have been so confused here. Like, you would be questioning, why is Delia holding a random trophy at the beach? It's just like, what? I've never seen that before. And why is she holding a trophy? There is a bit of trivia to this. Originally, Ash's flashback about his mum was from Beauty and the Beach, but was later changed to a clip from Pokemon I Choose You after the episode aired in Japan for an unknown reason. Since 4Kids receives the version from the original airing, the Beauty and the Beach clip was carried over into the dub, despite the episode being initially banned. So, part of me thinks that the change was made because Japan sort of might have realized that that episode wouldn't fly in other areas, other locations. So, like, you know what, we'll alter it and we will put in an episode that definitely will have been shown. But something tells me that they, I guess, when they were just handing over all of the episodes for 4Kids to dub, they just gave them the original episodes without really thinking about any changes that they'd made. So, yeah, that's sort of my sort of theory. I'm not sure how much weight it holds. A lot of the early days of the anime, even today, a lot of the stuff surrounding the anime is super, super mysterious and like way too unclear. Like, you only have to look at right now the status of where the hell is the dub from Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution. Like, dub actors have talked about it. They have confirmed that they've recorded it. We've found that it's been sort of submitted to Netflix apparently, but there's been no chat at all about it. Even like, we had the Twitter account hype up the Japanese release. The English Twitter account hyped up the Japanese release, and we still hear nothing. And then recently, the English Twitter account hyped up the sort of teaser for the next Pokemon movie. So the anime is just still shrouded in mystery. Back to the episode at hand here, though. The group arrives at the Pokemon Center where Nurse Joy reveals that the center's Pokemon lost their energy as of 3 days ago. She shows them a few of the Pokemon that have been affected, and even Pikachu becomes tired. Suddenly, a device on Officer Jenny's hip starts beeping. Jenny explains that she's tracking sleep waves that have appeared in the city. Meanwhile, Team Rocket is also tracking the source of the sleep waves in the hopes of putting the boss to sleep so they can take a much-needed vacation.
Please, is there anything you can tell us about these children?
I'd like to help you, but right now, I'm afraid I've got my hands full with our own mystery.
What do you mean? What's the matter?
All the Pokemon here at the center are behaving very strangely.
Huh?
Just look at Cubone. And Oddish. Even Magikarp is affected, and it's usually full of life.
The magic's disappeared.
Looks like it's ready for the deli counter.
So Pokemon Center Watch is back. It's your favourite segment of every episode. The Pokemon Center here looks like a giant spaceship, which, I mean, I don't have much more to add. You guys know what I think of the awesome designs of the Pokemon Center. A big fan, and yeah, this one looks like a spaceship for some reason, which, I mean, I kind of dig it. In terms of the missing persons case going on here, I think there's not nearly enough concern. Like, in real life, if this happened in real life, it's like probably at least half a dozen kids that have gone missing in the past 3 days. In real life, people would be thinking, oh shit, there's a serial killer on the loose, or maybe a pedophile, maybe some fucking sex trafficking's going on here. But instead, they just think this is some sort of quirky mystery, and nobody's too concerned. Like, nobody's too desperate, and nobody really seems to be searching for them. So, yeah, it's very, very, very strange response. Also, why has Jenny just been randomly tracking sleep waves? She makes it seem like she was kind of just doing it for fun, and it hasn't been related to any cases. Similarly, like, why is Team Rocket tracking sleep waves? It just comes absolutely out of the blue. And before I move on here, we've got a notable dub edit. There's an exchange between Ash and Misty that is a little bit different between the English and the Japanese. Misty originally says that she'd better watch out for kidnappers due to her being cute. Ash acts confused, then Misty says, "What?" and Ash then begrudgingly mentions that she's cute and that she'd better watch out. In the dub, this was changed to Misty mentioning that she'll be on these posters when she's a movie star, and Ash mentions that she may be a star of horror films, which really shocks me that it wasn't the other way around for these two different dubs, because 4Kids loves them some shipping between Ash and Misty, so it's crazy that they would actually remove a reference to Ash finding Misty cute. Ash and the group track the sleep waves to a rooftop mansion with a trimmed hedge garden. Ash and Brock burst through the doors. To their surprise, there is a formal gathering of well-dressed adults, and Drowsy and Hypno resting on a podium. Ash's Pokédex provides further details. The adults explain that their Drowsy finally evolved to Hypno 3 days ago, and they have been using Hypno's sleep waves instead of sleeping pills. Finally, a man explains that they are the members of the Pokemon Lovers Club, who have all grown to love Hypno the most. Apparently, the city life is stressful on the members, and so they've turned into insomniacs. The only cure they've been able to find was Hypno's sleep waves. However, as Brock deduces, Hypno's hypnosis is generally used on Pokemon. When altered to affect people, it has side effects that cause Pokemon to lose energy and possibly affect extra sensitive kids.
Are you new members?
Members?
We've been monitoring some sleep waves coming from up here.
Sleep waves? Oh, I know. This Hypno must have been emitting them.
Hypno?
Hypno, a hypnosis Pokémon. It carries a pendulum-like device and performs hypnotic attacks.
Alright, first off, how did nobody know there was a gigantic mansion on top of this building's roof? They run up to the top of it, and then they are blown away that there's a mansion up there. Like, surely it would be common knowledge that there is a giant mansion on a roof. That's not something you can really keep a secret. Also, this mansion gives up, like, super fucked up vibes in here. It really feels like there's some sort of super elite Illuminati shit going on inside. And I guess it is kind of weird that they're, like, worshipping Drowsy and Hypno and sort of using them to fall asleep, and they're having parties based around it. It's super weird. And yeah, again, this could be like ripped straight out of a horror movie. I really have no doubts whatsoever that these guys do some totally shady shit with their Pokemon. There's also an error here. The Pokemon Lovers Club is the Japanese of the Pokemon Fan Club, and this was actually left unchanged for the English dub. I don't think the dubbers realised that this was actually a reference, so it ends up saying Pokemon Lovers Club, which again, I mean, Pokemon Lovers Club sort of just plays into the weirdness and the creepiness of this little cult going on here. Misty, curious about the effects that these sleep waves can have on kids, allows herself to be hypnotized by Hypno. Hypno starts its hypnosis and she suddenly begins acting like a seal and runs into a nearby park. It opens up into a clearing, revealing not only Misty, but all the missing children acting like Pokemon, and Brock reiterates his theory. Officer Jenny attempts to wake the children from their hypnosis, but it's of no use. The head of the club suggests using Drowsy's sleep attacks to induce dream wavelengths, which could counteract Hypno's wavelengths. So there's a pretty major change to this scene after the episode 38 seizure incident. All scenes with a full screen hypnosis effect by either Drowsy or Hypno were changed to be a still image. This change affected all home releases and rebroadcasts in Japan, and obviously all international versions of the episode. And I obviously get why they changed it. It was a huge concern in Japan, and I guess around the world after the seizure incident. They really wanted to make sure that something like that would never even remotely get a chance to happen again. But it really does suck. Like, this still image of Hypno's hypnosis just comes off really, really poorly, and it's not great. It's not a huge issue for the episode, but like, looking at the effect that they were intending to use there, it would have definitely been way cooler than just a still image that plays out like a slideshow. I also can't believe that nobody thought to check the park in the middle of the city for the missing kids. Did you people even try to find them? It's literally a park in the middle of the city. It's not some hidden area. You would think, oh, we've got a half a dozen kids that have gone missing. Let's all go out and look for them. Maybe we'll go look in the park. It's such a basic thing to do, and they don't do it. They're not even remotely hidden. It's just they're right there, and apparently nobody really cared. They're just like, oh, they'll come home. Which, I guess, kind of looking at this through a Japanese lens, I'm pretty sure Japanese people have a much more sort of lax nature when it comes to sort of like supervising their kids. Regularly, they'll sort of let them just, I guess, venture out on their own. And this is something I even experienced when I was in Japan. I remember distinctly one of the sort of shrines I went to. I remember distinctly getting off at the station, and there was just like a girl who might have been like 4 years old, and she was just literally like traversing Japan on her own. So I guess the fact that like all of these kids have just ventured off and nobody's extremely worried, maybe I guess that sort of makes sense in Japan, and maybe if it went on for a lot longer, they'd be more concerned. So yeah, maybe it's just sort of a clash of cultures. Back at the mansion, Drowsy uses its ability to put Misty into a trance. Finally, it claps, awakening Misty from both the trance and the hypnosis. Relieved that the solution worked, Ash carries Drowsy to take it to the clearing to cure the other children. En route, Team Rocket soars down from the sky on hang gliders, reciting their motto. On the ground, Jessie pulls out a mirror and they try to get Hypno to hypnotize itself. Ash, with some fast thinking, throws a potted plant, smashing the mirror. Not yet finished, Team Rocket breaks out the whips and snare Drowsy and Hypno. Ash holds on to Drowsy while Misty uses Sayu to cut the whips. Ash calls Pidgeotto to gust Team Rocket away.
As the Team Rocket mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the sleepiest of them all? Dirty trick strategy.
Just don't hypnotize me. Okay, do it.
You've got to do something, Ash!
There's not much time.
And we thought so hard to come up with that strategy.
I'm really not a fan of Team Rocket's plan here. I'm going to go into it in a little bit more depth when I talk about my thoughts on the episode, but yeah, just suffice to say, I'm not a fan of their appearance here whatsoever. With Team Rocket out of the way, they use Drowsy to cure the children, who awaken and run home. Also, Arnold's mother embraces her son, much to Jenny, Ash, and his friends' delight. They head back to the Pokemon Center and cure the Pokemon there. Misty wonders what they dream about, and Brock suspects they dream of getting stronger and evolving. Ash attempts to take all the credit for solving the case, though Brock and Misty quickly correct him. Nurse Joy then realizes there is one Pokemon, a Psyduck, that is still holding its head. Brock, as a Pokemon breeder, volunteers to take it, but shortly after heading out, attempts to pass it off on Misty, claiming that as a water-type Pokemon, it should go to her. Misty refuses to accept the so-called boring Pokemon. Ash's Pokedex reports that Psyduck always has a headache. Misty, in a fit of shock, trips over a rock and a Pokeball rolls out of her bag in front of Psyduck. It pecks the ball and is caught, much to Misty's dismay.
My Pokeball! Oh no! Now it's in my Pokeball?
Good work, Misty. You captured Psyduck.
Oh no, I've got the headache.
It's really weird that nobody seems to realize that Psyduck always has a headache. Like, it's not until they head out that they find out it always has a headache thanks to Dexter. You would think, like, Officer Jenny or Nurse Joy would know that that is a thing. Like, that's Psyduck's thing, is that it always has a headache, and nobody seems to know this. Also, Misty catching Psyduck in this episode just feels wrong. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, Psyduck barely appears here, and it feels like it should have been the focus of the episode where it was captured, not just like a little footnote at the end of it. It's barely a step up from sort of when Brock caught his Zubat off screen. It's like the bare minimum you would do for a capture, which, yeah, like, I'm not a huge fan of it. But at the end of this episode, we actually get to see Psyduck inside the Pokeball, and this is the very first time where a Pokemon is ever actually shown inside of its Pokeball. Like, the actual inside is shown. This didn't happen again until over 700 episodes later in the light of Flockacy Ranch, so it's not something they really wish to explore too often. But that brings the episode to a close. My thoughts on the episode: I don't think this is exactly a good episode, but it's 100% worth watching just because of how weird it is from start to finish. As I alluded to earlier, I think Team Rocket's plan is just so dumb, and the fact that Hypno sort of randomly goes along with it and almost nobody does anything to stop it is baffling. They just stand around and watch it, which it's not great writing. And then the writers basically admit how dumb it is with a fourth wall breaking line from Team Rocket. Just, yeah, I don't like it at all. It's a really unnecessary appearance from Team Rocket, to be honest. They didn't even need to be in this episode. Overall, the episode is almost completely inconsequential, except for the fact that Psyduck gets caught, and that's sort of tacked on to the end. Despite all of these negatives, there is a plus side. All the weirdness that happens throughout makes sure that the episode never drags and it never gets boring. It's not exactly a memorable episode, but it's not exactly bad either. So if you're looking to watch one of the quirky episodes of Pokemon, I would definitely recommend this. But if you're just looking to watch sort of the major episodes or the really good episodes, this is definitely something you could give a skip, especially because Psyduck's capture, it really isn't a major part of the episode. So there's one major event to recap from this episode. Misty accidentally catches her Psyduck. There is obviously no update to Ash Ketchum's win-loss record. It's still 4 wins and 5 losses because battling is not even remotely mentioned in this episode. So with all of that said and done, it's time for Pokemail and our question of the episode. So the question of the episode for Hypno's Naptime, I want to ask all of you, if Pokemon were real, which Pokemon's ability do you think you would be most likely to take advantage of to better your everyday life? So we see the creepy Pokemon Lovers Club cult here using the hypnosis to help them sleep better. I want to know what Pokemon ability that you think would probably be most beneficial to you. Personally, I would love a flying type Pokemon. It would mean that I could get to places so much quicker. It would make my commute to work so much easier. Instead of sitting for 45 to 50 minutes in traffic going to and from work, I could probably fly there in like half that time. It would be so much more enjoyable. I could sleep in longer. I could get home earlier. Oh boy, it would be an absolute dream come true. But I'm eager to hear your responses to the questions, so go over to the YouTube video, scroll down to the comments, and leave your answer. And yeah, I'll love to see what you guys are going to say. But now, let's jump into our second episode of the week. Our second episode for today is the 28th episode of the Indigo League series titled Pokémon Fashion Flash. In Japan, the episode was titled Rokon Breeder Showdown. This episode aired on October 7, 1997 in Japan and on October 14, 1999 in the United States. When this episode first aired in Japan, it actually was part of a little special package. The episode was followed by Pocket Monsters Fall Special, which was a 90-minute clip show that summed up episode 1 to episode 27, which, boy, the Japanese loved a clip show. They aired so many of these. They initially started out as like random specials, like they would be like 90 minutes long, but eventually they sort of integrate them into the season itself, which I think it starts from Hoenn. They'll basically have a clip show per season, which would get skipped by 4Kids, which I'm surprised they didn't just dub it. Like, clip shows were just as relevant to like English-speaking audiences. Like, I mean, you only have to look at something like The Simpsons to have that. And I think it's even more relevant for Pokemon, which has an ongoing narrative. Because as a kid, especially back then where streaming services aren't as prevalent, getting home releases were pretty shoddy back then. And like, you're definitely not going to be able to like illegally download something. So clip shows were a pretty important way to sort of bring people up to speed. And I'm surprised that 4Kids weren't like, you know what, we need to use these clip shows to introduce new kids into the show that may have like tried to jump on board mid-season. I'm going to skip the On This Day in Pokemon History for the Japanese air date because I actually covered this date pretty recently, so I'll just be repeating myself. On this day in Pokemon History for the American air date, that's October 14, in 1999, Don't Touch That Dial aired in Japan, which is the first episode of the Johto saga. And on the same day, 1 year later, that episode also aired in the United States, so Ash is off on his Johto journey on the same day, just a year apart for the two different countries. The IMDb rating for this episode is a 7.1, and the screenplay was written by Atsuhiro Tomioka. This is the 7th episode he has written for the show, giving him the most episodes written again. It's also his equal lowest rated episode written so far, which it slots right alongside Clefairy and the Moonstone. Yuji Asada is in the director's chair here. This is his 6th episode, giving him the most episodes directed again. He also teamed up with Tomioka for Clefairy and the Moonstone, which is also his lowest rated episode too. So they're a bit of a pair here, and unfortunately, this is one of their lower rated episodes. As for the debuts, we do have a recurring human character debut here. It's Suzy, who will return just one more time, I believe. She's only appeared once more. For Pokemon debuts, we have the debut of Nidoran, Vulpix, Venonat, and Voltorb. Who's That Pokemon today is Vulpix. And with all of that said and done, it's time to jump into the episode summary and discussion. Ash, Misty and Brock find themselves on Scissor Street, also referred to as Breeder's Lane. Brock explains that it is well known for its high-end Pokemon salons and beauty parlours. Misty, with Ash in tow, pauses outside of one venue in particular to examine a poster featuring a Koffing and Ekans adorned with a number of gaudy accessories. Inside Salon Roquet, Team Rocket enacts their latest money-making scheme, a bustling beauty parlour. They give a woman's Raichu and Dodrio a colour and fur makeover, much to the displeasure of both Pokemon.
Scissor Street? Why'd we come here?
You'll see.
Sure are a lot of Pokemon beauty parlors.
Ash and his friends take a walk along Scissor Street. Why have they come here? Only Brock knows the answer.
Is there any place special you want to visit, Brock?
Wait a minute, I just remembered that Scissor Street is also called Breeder's Lane.
My first question for this episode is Scissor Street located in Hop 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 Town, or is it somewhere else entirely? Because obviously the location of this episode, like, it's Scissor Street, it's just a street. We don't ever hear that they've like moved to a new town. So part of me wants to believe that it's inside Hop 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 Town. I couldn't really find anything that directly confirmed it. It would also make a whole lot more sense when linking back to that trivia about the P1 apparently being a Celadon, because at least they're like just one town over from Celadon if Scissor Street is in Hop 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 Town. If this is in an entirely other town, they're like doing some really weird backtracking. The first instances of Misty and Ash referencing breeding here is really, really weird, because they don't mention that it's Pokemon breeding until the narrator mentions it afterwards, so they're just talking about like breeding generally, and it's like, oh, this is a weird episode until the narrator clears up that they're talking about Pokemon. Also, when we see Team Rocket's salon, the paint edits sort of to cover up, I guess they must have had Japanese characters there, and they just put Team Rocket R's there. They are so incredibly bad. I don't usually notice paint edits like this. Like, it usually just sort of washes over me. And they're generally sort of more background stuff. But this was so ugly. Like, it was distractingly bad, and it's almost impossible. It's impossible to notice. To not notice, sorry. This episode actually has a ridiculous amount of paint edits. There was a total of 22 scenes where digital editing had to be employed to remove Japanese characters, which that's got to probably be one of the absolute highest amounts in the history of the show, because eventually the show moves to its own sort of made-up language that they use on signs and that sort of thing. And eventually the writers and directors and animators sort of realized that the show is worldwide, and they stopped relying so heavily on Japanese characters. So I could imagine that this might actually be the most edit-intensive episode when it comes to sort of covering things up with paint. Debating whether or not to join the throng of apparently eager customers vying to get inside the Salon Roquet, she is interrupted by Brock, who announces that he has found it. Ash and Misty follow him a short distance to a less crowded storefront, whereupon Brock is suddenly struck by a fit of apparent nervousness and freezes. Oblivious, Ash and Misty enter first and are greeted by a feminine voice that serves the added effect of snapping Brock back to reality. I'm really confused why Team Rocket don't just quit and start up a legitimate business. They really do seem to be good at everything except stealing Pokemon and being criminals. They've managed to get such a huge following, and like later on, I guess like Suzy sort of talks down on their salon abilities, but the fans love it. Like the general public love it, so like, I don't know, just they get a pass, I guess. Like, people like it, and they're not doing anything actually shady there. They're not ripping people off. They're literally just doing a job. So I don't know why they don't just give up their criminal ways and run the salon. You'll make a bunch of money. You'll be rich. You won't have to try and impress your boss. There's also a little bit of trivia about the salon outfits that Jessie and James wear in this episode. They resemble those of Oscar and Andy, which is they're the two main characters from the manga series, The Rose of Versailles. And at the end here, we also have another paint edit on Suzy's studio. This time they replaced Japanese text with like a PNG of Vulpix, and it is so bad. I highly recommend going back and watching the first few minutes of this episode just to see how poor the editing is here. Inside, they meet a Pokemon breeder who introduces herself as Suzy while she's gently massaging a Chansey. However, Misty has shifted her attention to a Vulpix that is asleep on a chair. Ash scans it with his Pokédex while Misty approaches the sleeping Pokemon. Misty, enthralled by the cute Vulpix, picks it up while offering numerous compliments. However, Vulpix, annoyed by the interruption of its nap, fires a flamethrower at Misty's face before falling back asleep. Brock, who has been unusually silent up to this point, suddenly blurts out that he wants to become Suzy's pupil. Everyone is shocked, especially Suzy, who explains she does not have time for students due to her busy workload. After Ash asks, Brock explains that Suzy is a highly accomplished breeder who has won the World Pokemon Breeders Contest for 3 consecutive years, and she's someone he idolizes.
Suzy?
Yes?
My name's Brock. Nice to meet you, Suzy. I want to breed like you. I want to be a breeder like you.
It's very nice to meet you, Brock. I'm flattered you want to make me your model.
Yes, I want to model you. I'm flattered that you're flattered. Your Vulpix is nice. What I'm really trying to say is, Suzy, I'm begging you to accept me as your pupil.
So 4Kids really slipped something past the center here. Brock says to Suzy, I want to breed like you. And they somehow got away with that. I have no idea. They edit out things like a slap, but Brock saying, I want to breed like you to a woman just stays in. And it made me laugh. I thought the line was extremely out of left field and extremely funny. But yeah, it was also shocking that it got left in. As for Suzy, she is voiced by Leah Applebaum. We spoke about her last episode. However, when she reappears in Beauty and the Breeder, that's Suzy, she is actually voiced by Megan Hollingshead. So, as I mentioned in the last episode, Leah Applebaum shows up a couple times in these episodes and then just disappears for good. There's also a dub edit here in regards to Suzy. The details of her 2 accomplishments differ between the Japanese original and the English dub. In the original, it is mentioned that she was nominated as Trainer of the Year and that she ranked number 1 in Pokemon breeding for 4 years in a row. The English dub calls her the most popular Pokemon breeder for 4 years straight and states that she has a hugely popular website with upwards of 10,000 hits per day. And finally, some whack trivia here. According to the 3rd book of the Kids Pocket Books Pocket Monster series, the Chansey's trainer in this episode is gay, which what in the ever-loving fuck? Surely this can't be true. Surely that book was not talking about Chansey's sexual preferences. Like, why would that even come up in the book? It's so strange. Like, why would they put that in there? And I really want to know if this is true. Finding out if it's actually true is probably going to be impossible in 2020, but I really hope that somebody actually wrote that Chansey was gay, just because Chansey appears in this episode for literally like 8 seconds. It gets massaged and then it disappears for good. I don't know how or why or when they would have said that it was gay, but whew, they were doing some weird thing in Pokemon adaptations back then. Later, Suzy serves tea for the three while Pikachu happily munches on some food. Suzy compliments Pikachu's shiny coat and asks if Brock made his food. Brock replies that he did, and Misty explains that it's Brock's own recipe. Suzy explains that she got into Pokemon breeding because of her interest in Pokemon nutrition. During this exchange, Vulpix suddenly joins Pikachu in eating his food. This surprises Suzy, who explains that Vulpix usually does not eat anything she hasn't made herself. Misty then mentions all the flashily dressed Pokemon they saw outside. Suzy points out that ever since Salon Roquet opened up, trainers have been focusing on making their Pokemon look as flashy as possible. Ash says that looking flashy is dumb, but Misty counters that even Pokemon like to dress up once in a while. This leads to an argument between Ash and Misty about what is more important for a Pokemon and its trainer. Ash jokingly suggests that, if fashion is so important to Misty, she should take her Psyduck over to Salon Roquet. Misty loves the idea and calls out Psyduck, much to Ash's amusement. So as you've just heard, I didn't like the way Misty caught Psyduck in the last episode, but I do like that they're featuring it immediately in an episode. It didn't really get enough time to sort of shine in its capture episode, but it's basically one of the main stars of this episode, so I think that's actually a pretty good decision, and it makes the decision to sort of tack on Psyduck's capture in the last episode a little less annoying to me, I guess. However, what I don't like is basically this entire scene. We spend an eternity watching these characters have tea, and then we get, after this, an extended scene of like Suzy giving a Pokemon care lecture. It just goes on forever. It's so boring, and it really doesn't add anything. It just kind of kills time. So after Misty leaves, Suzy expresses doubt in her own methods, but Brock and Ash quickly reassure her. Brock suggests a way in which Suzy can compete with the growing popularity of salons like Salon Roquet. Soon after, Suzy explains that if a Pokemon has been injured in a battle, it should be given a therapeutic massage, which she demonstrates on Pikachu. As Brock had hoped, Suzy's lecture starts to draw the crowd away from Salon Roquet. As Suzy, Ash and Brock demonstrate the importance of good communication between Pokemon and trainer, trainers arriving from Salon Roquet begin to doubt if they made the right choice. Meanwhile, at Salon Roquet, Jessie orders Meowth to send in the next customer, though they are shocked to see it's Misty, with her Psyduck. Team Rocket drag her in for a makeover of her own, her protest that Psyduck was the one who needed the makeover falling upon deaf ears. She loves the bright and flashy results, however, and asks the undercover Jessie and James to continue. Meowth then mentions Pikachu, tipping Misty off to his identity. Jessie and James begin attacking Meowth, who scratches them, revealing their true identities. Misty screams that she will never tell Team Rocket anything, but James threatens to paint her face like Frankenstein if she does not. Thinking that over for a moment, she suddenly realizes that Psyduck has gone missing. In fact, Psyduck has run back to Suzy's salon, where it tells Pikachu that Misty is in trouble. Pikachu signals that Misty is in danger and takes off with Brock, Ash and Suzy behind him.
Only one customer?
1 or 1 million, it doesn't matter as long as we have customers who appreciate true beauty.
We only want to offer our services to the most refined customers.
We're not gonna make any money that way.
Hello there, everybody.
Welcome, young lady.
Hey, what are you doing?
Step in, don't be shy.
No, not me, Psyduck.
Don't be so hard on yourself. You're just as lovely as any Psyduck.
Hold on a second.
It's another masterpiece.
Now, honestly, Misty's first makeover that she gets from Jessie and James isn't the worst. It doesn't look too bad. She honestly came out looking kind of good. So, again, Jessie and James are good at what they do. I don't know why they keep insisting on doing crimes. They're much better than that. I did find it really shocking that the animation gets a real shoddy here at one moment. Misty's neck clips through James's arm when he sort of grabs her in a headlock and threatens to make her look like Frankenstein, which it's actually Frankenstein's monster, not Frankenstein. Frankenstein is just the doctor and he's a normal person. Just me getting pedantic there. But yeah, like Misty's neck like weirdly clips through James's arm and it's very, very noticeable. It's basically a close-up and it's hard to miss. So they make their way back to Salon Roquet where they face off against Team Rocket, who has since tied Misty to a chair. They are startled to see what Team Rocket has done to Misty's face, but Team Rocket defends the bizarre makeover, claiming they are conducting important beauty research. This starts an argument between Suzy and Team Rocket about whether beauty is on the inside or the outside. Meowth, however, interrupts by revealing Team Rocket's fraudulent intentions. Team Rocket offers a trade, Misty for Pikachu. Ash refuses and challenges them to a battle. Team Rocket, however, pushes a button on a microphone which reveals their latest invention, the Salon Roquet battling platform. Jessie sends out Ekans and James sends out Coughing, both of which are still dressed in their ridiculous outfits. Ash sends out Pikachu and Brock uses Geodude. Brock orders a seismic toss and Geodude carries Ekans into the air and flings it down. However, Ekans turns the momentum of the throw into a spinning wheel strike and slams into Pikachu. Ash calls for a Thundershock, but the spinning of Coughing and Ekans makes their extravagant outfits deflect the lightning. James then orders Sludge, blinding both Pikachu and Geodude, but as Team Rocket's Pokemon are sent in to finish them off, Ekans and Coughing end up tripping over their outfits, halting the attack. Meowth tries to help the tangled Pokemon, but Vulpix cuts in. Suzy makes her stand and calls out that if the focus is on outer beauty, a Pokemon's inner strength will be lost. Vulpix's powerful Fire Spin drives the message home and sends Team Rocket blasting off. So not a whole lot to say here, it's a pretty just stock standard run-of-the-mill Team Rocket encounter here. I do have a bit of trivia though, this is the first episode where Brock's Geodude is seen using a move, which really just goes to illustrate how Brock and Misty, generally their Pokemon, just don't get featured at all, don't have any personality, and just completely irrelevant. Like literally, Ash battled Brock at a gym, and Geodude still hadn't used a proper move for until episode 28. It's just insane. They did such a poor job giving any of their Pokemon any personalities, and then they keep giving them Pokemon, and they just never really sort of do anything with them. It's really baffling. It's sort of like, oh, we've got nothing going on in this episode. Maybe we'll give Brock or Misty a Pokemon. That'll tide them over for a week. Brock takes the opportunity to explain to the crowd that Vulpix is a prime example that a cute exterior hides inner strength. The crowd, taking the words to heart, begin to remove all the flashy items from their Pokemon and wipe off the applied makeup. Back at her salon, Suzy thanks Ash and his friends for helping her regain confidence in her beliefs. She plans to leave the salon for a while and go on a journey to learn what it truly means to be a Pokemon breeder, and proclaims she is still a student and now Brock's rival. Suzy says that Brock is the first person other than herself that Vulpix has shown affection to, and asks that Brock take care of Vulpix for a while she's on journey. Brock gratefully accepts and obtains the small fire-type Pokemon. Meanwhile, Ash looks at Misty's made-up face again and cracks up, laughing, angering her.
Right now, I believe you could do a better job of raising Vulpix than I could.
Oh, Pix.
Thanks. I don't know what to say.
Oh, Pika.
You don't have to worry, Vulpix. I promise I'll take good care of you. All right! I got Vulpix!
It really is kind of weird that Suzy gives Brock her Vulpix. There's almost no justification for it. She says in the dub that he could do a better job raising it than her, but we know, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that she eventually asks for it back. So it just plays off really weird, and what is the point of Brock temporarily looking after Vulpix? Why doesn't she just take Vulpix with her? It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it makes the whole capture of Vulpix just seem kind of pointless. Brock's also able to capture Vulpix despite it being owned by Suzy. He physically captures it in a Pokeball, which is a little bit of a weird quirk there. Also, when he captures it, he simply takes out the Pokeball and opens it, and it draws Vulpix inside, sort of how you would expect them to return a Pokemon if they'd sent it out, which to date, this is the only Pokemon capture without direct physical contact between the Pokeball and the Pokemon. So yeah, just a lot of strange things going on with this capture in general. And finally, as of this episode, Brock has as many non-Rock-type Pokemon in his team as he has Rock-type Pokemon now. He's got his Onix, he's got his Geodude, there's his Rock-type Pokemon, and then since joining Ash, he's caught a Zubat and a Vulpix, which it kind of, yeah. I mean, there's no reason why he needs to stay a ground-type trainer, and they really diverge away from this. He's, unlike Misty, who's always talking about being a Water Master, Brock never mentions really actually giving a shit about a specific type. He's all about Pokemon breeding. So yeah, it does make sense that ground types aren't really that heavily featured from him. But it's still a little bit weird that he's almost immediately just thrown his rock type specialty out the window. So soon enough, Ash, Misty and Brock are on their way once again and wave goodbye to Suzy. Behind them, Team Rocket runs past, pursued by a crowd of their angry former customers. So I don't know why they're angry at them. Like, I guess they were being dicks to, like, Misty. But to everybody else, they made over your Pokemon and you liked those makeovers. You enjoyed them until somebody else told you, no, you shouldn't enjoy those things. So something tells me that they're not angry because they attacked Misty. I don't think there would be an angry mob because of that. And that brings the episode to an end. I do have one little last bit of trivia. Meowth's song replaces 151 as the Japanese ending theme, which ending and opening themes tend to, well, maybe opening themes are actually pretty strict, but I think ending themes change like pretty often in the Japanese. Like, they don't stick around for too long. So my thoughts on the episode, I think this is a very bland and boring episode. You might have been able to tell by the fact that I didn't have a whole lot of critical notes to sort of discuss while I was going through the episode summary. As I mentioned, there's a 5-minute scene, like legitimately like 5-minute scene where the gang and Suzy just chat over tea, which is just dreadfully boring. It doesn't really give us like any cool information about the world or just anything that matters. The one interesting aspect throughout the episode is the slight lingering chance that Brock could leave the group and join Suzy. The anime was still pretty new at the time, so the potential of that happening could have seemed real to people watching. But obviously, we know that doesn't happen. I'm not a fan of this episode, and honestly, I was begging for it to be over. This might actually be my least favourite episode so far. At least Beauty and the Beach had the complete and utter absurdity going for it. This one is just boring until eventually Brock is gifted a Pokemon. The absolutely terrible dub edits for the animation are the icing on the cake, cementing this as a bad episode. Like, just when you take like a bland, boring episode with quite a lot of animation errors and weird animation edits, it just makes for something that's not enjoyable. So yeah, I'd probably put this as my least favourite episode so far. So to recap the events of this episode, Ash and his friends meet Suzy, a Pokemon breeder. Brock's Geodude is revealed to know Seismic Toss, and Brock receives a Vulpix from Suzy. Ash Ketchum's win-loss record obviously stays the same. Ash is really not even the focus of this episode, which means it's time for another round of Pokemail. And so my question of this episode is going to be, can you name a Vulpix moment, like a specific moment that it has during its time with Brock in the anime that comes from an episode other than the episode where it joins Brock and the episode where it leaves Brock? Because I honestly can't think of another iconic thing it did between its joining Brock and its leaving, which it leaves in the middle of Johto, so it's around for like 140 episodes, I think, and I honestly can't, off the top of my head, name a Vulpix moment other than it leaving and it joining. So I want you guys to try and dig deep and find your favorite Vulpix moment that isn't its beginning or ending episodes. But that does us for today's episode. Thanks for listening to Who's That Pokemon. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, basically anywhere in the world you can get podcasts from. You can also find the show on Twitter at Who's That PKMN Pod to keep up with the latest updates for the show. And I'm on Twitter as @SourceMarlow. You can also check out my YouTube channel WTP Productions, where you'll find all sorts of Pokemon content covering the games, anime, everything in between. I should have a Pokemon Yellow review going up soon, hopefully this Friday. If not, it'll be the following Friday. That's coming along swimmingly, and hopefully I'm all settled in my new place now. I've got my new sort of studio, quote unquote studio set up, so hopefully my production is going to be more streamlined than it was in the past. It was kind of thrown together, and hopefully I'll be able to deliver videos in a more consistent manner, in sort of the way that I've been able to deliver this podcast in a consistent manner. But that's all for today's episode. I hope you join me next time as I take a look back at the punchy Pokemon and Sparks Fly for Magnemite. We'll already be saying goodbye to Primeape, but Ash immediately replaces it with his very own Muck.